kung fu.
Hello everybody, welcome to the Comic Gamer Movie Show. My name's Deshaun, and today I have an action classic for you. 2023's X2, X-Men 2. United, some places it was called X-Men 2 United, but we just call it X2. The smash big sequel to the original 2000s X-Men by Bryan Singer, directed by Bryan Singer. The X2 is probably one of the all-time greatest sequels in movie history, in my opinion, but it's also one of the all-time greatest comic book movies with some of the most with one or two of the most iconic action sequences in comics. And not only that, but it's probably, in my book, one of the most underrated comic book films of all time. To me, there are three great underrated comic book films. One is Captain America: The First Avenger. The other is Batman Begins, and X2 is the third one. I think X2 is highly underrated. I think because a year later Spider-Man 2 came out, and Spider-Man 2 became this iconic thing to so many people, and it's a great movie, don't get me wrong. Spider-Man 2 deserves the praise it has gotten, but X2 kind of got lost in the glow of Spider-Man 2, at least in my personal opinion. Because people don't hold that movie to much higher regard. I believe if you ask most people what their favorite X-Men movie, I'm not talking about spin-off like Logan or Deadpool, I'm talking about X-Men movie, most people would say Days of Future Past. To me, I love X2. So X2 takes place maybe a year or so after the events of the 2000 X-Men movie. And the 2000 X-Men movie was a great introduction to the X-Men, or it was a really good introduction. Bryan Singer was kind of on that Christopher Nolan path of not really wanting to do his own thing with the source material, of not even really wanting to do the same things from the source material, as you know, with the leather suits and everything, because he had the whole spandex joke in the first movie. We all remember that joke. But yeah, Bryan Singer did, as many problems as that original X-Men movies did have, it did a lot of great things, which is why it spun off a franchise that would span over over a decade-long franchise. But the greatest thing that it did was introduce Hugh Jackman, because actors like Patrick Stewart, Ian McKellen, Halle Berry, James Marsden was on the come up. Those kind of actors, they were already kind of established, or at least they already had a foothold in Hollywood. Hugh Jackman was an unknown, dude. Hugh Jackman was an unknown. I don't even know, he was a newcomer. I'm not even sure if he had worked on a movie before he was cast as Logan Wolverine. And he was the main protagonist. And him and Wolverine and Rogue were kind of co-main protagonists of that first movie, because they were the entrance into the world. But Hugh Jackman was the breakout of that movie. Obviously, he would go on to be Wolverine for decades. He's still Wolverine technically to this day. So X2 he is kind of heading it up again as they bring on new characters, such as Alan Cummings coming in to be introducing Nightcrawler, and Brian Cox, who most people know from Succession, but he did a lot of things before that, Brian Cox, but Succession is the thing he's most known for now. But back in the day, yes, he came on to play William Stryker, which, if you're a comic book fan like I am, and someone who's played the games and whatnot and watched the shows, you would know Stryker is the man who gave Wolverine the old adamantium dip. He is the man who who coated his claws in the indestructible metal that he's known for today. William Stryker is he's always tried to weaponize the mutant potential to control mutants to be used. Although this version of William Stryker is a bit different. But getting more into the story, it takes place maybe a year or so after the events of the first movie, where Magneto was defeated, and his whole Liberty City scheme to turn all of humanity to attempt to turn at least the people in the Manhattan into mutants went shit down, and he was in prison. And since then, things have been kind of pretty much going as you would imagine. Rogue is growing up. She's dating now. you know, Jean is dealing with some things because in the middle of all that stuff going on in that movie, in the first movie, they kind of hinted to the Phoenix, something that would be later on followed up on not very well in X-Men 3 Last Stand, but we're not talking about that of a movie. We're talking about X2. So X2, so there's a lot of things going on. There's characters in different places. Magneto's in prison. Like, there's Wolverine has been still searching to figure out his past, because as you know, in Wolverine's comic book past and in the movies, he had amnesia. You know, somewhere through the process of getting the adamantium put in his body, something happened and he lost his memories. And that's always kind of been a part of Wolverine's character in both, like I say, comics, video games, all different forms, is his lost memory. And he's trying to retrace his steps. And he has a dead end, so he decides to come back home. He comes back home just in time because, as it turns out, William Stryker has convinced the president to fund his crazy little side campaign against mutants, because as it's kind of established in this movie, because it's not really touched on a lot. I mean, it is touched in the original X-Men movie, but it's really touched on here, where it's like, no, like, mutants are on the radar of the president, of the governments. Like, they're aware of them. They're kind of trying to, like, downplay it, though. It's one of those things where, like, they're aware of mutants, but, like, outside of Magneto, there hasn't really been a mutant crisis that was so bad that the government felt the need to really go at the problem. The government's just kind of been like, you know what? We're talking to people. We're talking to Professor X, Professor Xavier and Jean Grey, and like they're meeting with politicians and stuff to try to conversate about these things. Like, it's like, you know, we're working on it, right? But unfortunately, Stryker managed to get his hands on Nightcrawler, tell him to go into that and freaking have him attempt to assassinate the president, launching his campaign, which results in Xavier's academy, school for the gifted, getting invaded, which is kind of iconic in my opinion. It's one of the things that happens all the time. It happened in X-Men 97. It's something that they don't do that much, like, at least in the movies. It's like the X-Mansion gets destroyed all the time. It gets destroyed, it gets invaded, and this movie was the first one to really pull that off successfully, with these armed men going into the X-Mansion. I mean, they kind of managed to kind of get around it by having it be this whole thing where most of the students were like away for summer or some bullshit, so like it wasn't actually a lot of kids there. Like, there wasn't as many kids there as it could have been, but still, Stryker coming in there, and taking everyone and like kidnapping the kids, Wolverine having to confront him, Wolverine having this awesome ass action sequence. I mean, look, long story short, the bad guys and the good guys have to get together to help fight William Stryker after he captures Professor X, and is going to use him in his own version of Cerebro to kill all mutants around the world. And that's about the main gist of the movie. This movie has amazing action in it. Some of the most iconic action sequences in all of comic books. The White House scene is well known. I'm happy to see Alan Cummings coming back to maybe do something even like that again. That sequence epitomizes everything Nightcrawler is about. I think they captured it so well. Also, the sequence in the mansion with Wolverine hunting down all those people was badass. It was cool. Even then, I wish it was one of those things where, man, it would have been cool to see blood back then. But early 2000s, PG-13, you got to keep things in perspective there. But that sequence in the mansion, awesome. Mystique had many awesome sequences, including her breaking into the facility, which was a badass sequence. Also, one of the most creative uses of superpowers in the history of superpowers is Magneto ripping the iron out of a man's blood. I never even thought he could do that. Like, my little kid brain exploded. I was just like, he could do that? He could just rip the iron out of your body? I was like, well, I guess it technically is. Wow, okay, yeah, he could do that to people. So that was dope. The final sequence was dope. The fight with Lady Deathstrike was awesome. Like, this movie did so many things right. Like I said, it's not loved, it's not held on the standards, because a lot of comic book people have feelings about this. They don't feel like, outside of the whole Bryan Singer of it all, because as we know, Bryan Singer was accused of a lot of things. But the bigger reason that this movie, I believe, isn't held as the high regard that it should be, is because a lot of comic book fans feel like this movie isn't their version of the X-Men, but for my money, it captured so much about what the X-Men are about. It is a big event. Like, this whole movie could have been like a nice comic book event. Hugh Jackman solidified himself as a leading actor and as Wolverine in this movie, and that's one other reasons that people don't like it, because they don't like that Hugh Jackman made Wolverine so bigger than the rest of the team. Because if you watch X-Men 97, you probably noticed that Wolverine was kind of in the background a little bit. And it kind of threw me off because I'm used to him being in the front ground, at least more than he was in that show. But I loved it, dude. I give X2 a 10 out of 10. I think it's one of the best comic book movies of all time. I think it does not get the love it deserves, and I feel like this is a good time to review it. Anyway, thank you guys for McKellen Great Movie Show. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Thank you guys again. Peace.